G20 Global Initiative. As we mark World Youth Skills Day this month, our focus is on essential role of youth-led regenerative agriculture in addressing land degradation, building food security, and driving climate resilience. Our speakers will share cutting-edge knowledge, policy insights, and real-world examples of youth-powered solutions that restore land and livelihoods. We encourage you to stay engaged, share your questions in the Q&A box as always. I would like to introduce our first speaker for today, policy engagement, youth organizing, and communication for development. She'll briefly discuss bridging policy communication, grassroots action, building cross-CCD youth caucus. Mahathi, welcome. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kili. Thank you. Elders, could you please share the presentation? Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are. My name is Mahathi. I am part of the steering committee for the UNCCD Youth Caucus, and I lead the food security and agriculture thematic. I'm also part of the Save Soil movement. I'm a policy researcher there, and I'm based out of India. So today I'd really like to speak more about how policy change and communication are an important tool in understanding how we can scale regenerative agriculture. So next slide, please. I think we'll have to go back to the beginning. I'm not sure this second. Yes, thank you. So as most of us know, there is a lot of talk about regenerative agriculture and what it can do to farmers, what it can do to our environment, to our food. But in reality, less than 5% of farmers around the world have actually adopted or transitioned to regenerative farming completely. Now, I think the question is if it is actually more profitable, if it is actually as good for the ecology as it is, why are more farmers not picking it up, right? That's because there is a transition cost associated with it, a transition period during which they have reduced income, they need to bear additional cost, and they require access to the right technical knowledge. A lot of things need to be addressed before they can manage to transition completely. So there is this gap between what we where we want to be and where we are currently. So what will it take to close this gap? Honestly, I think it'll take an entire ecosystem change to happen, but policies may play a huge role in making this happen. Next slide, please. So at Save Soil, where I'm working, we've identified 4 pillars which a policy can influence and which will bring about a change in the way regenerative farming is taken up at the moment. So the first one is knowledge systems. Currently, farmers do not have the right access to knowledge about what to do, where to pick up the new methodologies from, how to take up regenerative practices. So it's important for farmers to get real, usable local information. So we need policies that support this kind of cataloging and creating sustainable soil management practices based on crop type, based on regions and agroecological conditions. The second bit is having a support system for farmers. This is extremely crucial given that a lot of them around the world are small scale farmers, and there is so much information out there, but getting the right information to them is extremely important. So translating a lot of this knowledge into farmer friendly formats through videos in regional languages and a lot of other ways, conducting trainings on model farms, and ideally by progressive farmers themselves, and not some top-down lectures, because peer learning is something that's far more powerful for farmers, far more transformative for farmers than having somebody else talk about it. And the third is having a legal provision. So most countries around the world, and you would have heard of this too, they have very strong laws and regulations for air and water, but not really for soil. There are very few countries who actually have established something like that. So soil is often looked at just an input to agriculture, and it's not really looked at as a living ecosystem. So we need laws that clearly define what healthy soil is, who's responsible for protecting it, and what practices should be rewarded or discouraged. Right? And policies can play a huge role in ensuring these laws are established. And the fourth pillar is, of course, monitoring and learning systems, because we really should be able to track what's happening to soil, what is making it better, what is making it worse, and accordingly decide on policies and schemes. We'll look into a few countries which are already practicing such laws, who already have such policies in place. Next slide, please. So each country right now has different soil policies in place, because there really is no one size fits all when it comes to approaching soil. So, for example, Australia is one of the first countries to have a national soil strategy. It focuses on building soil knowledge for measuring soil health, and it aligns funding across departments. So it's really a great example of policy turning into action through consistent funding and having clear targets. So it's really doing a lot to promote farmers towards regenerative agriculture. Ethiopia is again another country doing something quite remarkable, actually. They've integrated soil restoration into a program they have called the Climate Resilient Green Economy Strategy. And it links land restoration to both food security and climate action. And so does Rwanda. And what's unique about Rwanda is that it has a heavy emphasis on community-based planning and implementation. So it's actually policies that listen to farmers. And of course, EU, the European Union, has proposed a soil health law, which requires every country who's part of EU to monitor soil health and identify risk and report regularly. And lastly, India. So India has many schemes which are promoting soil health and regenerative agriculture, although it doesn't really have an overarching national soil policy. So the point I wanted to make through all of this is that it's really possible to bring about changes on ground in a scalable manner. Currently, there are farmers here and there in each country in pockets who have transitioned to regenerative practices. But if you really want an entire country to shift, it is policies that have to change, and these countries are sort of showing that it can happen in practice. I would like to specifically take one example where I have worked to show how policy changes can be brought about by people working on it outside the government. Next slide, please. So, briefly talking about Save Soil and how we're trying to bring about policy changes for soil. So, till date, we've had three major movements, I would call them, not really campaigns. And all of them are focused towards soil, towards agroforestry, which is one regenerative practice. So in 2017, Rally for Rivers was a nationwide campaign that started, and it was essentially to bring about awareness amongst people across ages, across states, across socioeconomic status, to make them understand that our rivers are actually drying up and dying. It's a major problem in India and in many other countries as well. So this movement received the support of 162 million people and brought about a lot of awareness amongst the public. So when we're looking at policy changes, one initial step and very crucial is to bring awareness into public, which then sort of becomes part of the narrative and ends up in the boardrooms of policymakers. And in 2019, we had another movement starting called Kaveri Calling. This was essentially um, uh, sort of came from Rally for Rivers, and it's an on-ground project that we are working on. So we are working with farmers who have lands in the river basin called Kaveri, which is in southern India, and we're working with them to transition them to regenerative farming, to agroforestry specifically, to plant trees on their farms. And till date, over 250,000 farmers have picked up this practice and have seen a lot of them have seen their incomes rise 3 to 4 times. The soil is much better, the yield is much better. So a lot of the benefits associated with regenerative agriculture are visibly being seen and proven on ground. And that's something that's going on at the moment. And more recently, in 2022, we had an on-ground awareness campaign called Save Soil. And so it was essentially to bring awareness about how soil is dying and why we need to save it. And it was a global campaign which had a lot of people from around the world participate. And we reached over 2 billion people. And that's really helped us to um, uh, bring this into the attention of policymakers across countries. So these were not really campaigns in some sense, they're tipping points, which really helped shift public conversation towards policy making. So next slide, please. So one recent example of how these movements have impacted policy is that recently, a few weeks back, the government of India announced new rules for felling trees on agricultural farms in India. Earlier, it was almost impossible for farmers to do that. There were a lot of restrictions and regulations associated with it, which prevented people from picking up agroforestry, right? From farmers to do that. So with these rules, it makes it much easier for them to grow trees on their farm, to especially timber trees, and to sell them and sort of earn a much bigger income than they are at the moment. So this is something that's happened not out of the blue, but it's taken a lot of years of proof of participation and persistent storytelling. So that's what policy making is essentially about. It's sort of you're in it for the long haul. It's not going to see the day of light in 1 year or 2 years. It's going to take many years for policy changes to come into place. And I think there is a lot of scope for youth to participate in many ways in making that happen. And the other bit I wanted to speak about is how communications play a huge role in bringing about public awareness and also changing the narrative about regenerative agriculture and about soil or related issues. So next slide, please. So as part of Save Soil, I was in the media team, and during the initial phase and even now, there is a lot of emphasis on using mass media to promote narratives. Earlier, a lot soil meant maybe dirt to a lot of people. No one really saw soil as a living entity that needs to be saved. Nobody knew that it is dying and affecting food security and many other issues around it. So the one agenda we had behind using mass media as a tool was to change that narrative. And over the past 3 years, we've had over 7,000 media reports in publication across the globe. And this has really changed the way people think of soil, the way people address soil, or how they wish to use regenerative agriculture to sort of protect soil from degrading further. And another very crucial tool, which a lot of youth might relate to, is social media. If you can just go to the next slide. So this is another very sort of a magical tool, if I may call it, because more than mass media, people are consuming information through social media, through influencers who are being followed by millions of people. So as part of Save Soil, I was also in charge of making sure we leverage influencers to talk about soil in their own way, be it a fashion influencer or a chef or a farmer. They all had their own angles to pick in how soil is affecting them and what they care about. So we had over 8,000 influencers share about how soil is affecting us or soil degradation is affecting us. And that also played a big role in how the narrative shift happened. So that's something that is very useful when we want to change the narrative about regenerative agriculture. So I think this is also sort of proof that if you really design the message right and make it shareable, a lot of people, influencers, big and small, will really carry it and make it bigger than any campaign budget or paid campaign can do. So next slide, please. And what really excites me, I mean, it's Youth Skills Day today, and being in this field for the past few years, it's really exciting for me to see that there is so much opportunity for youth to be involved. There are a lot already, but there is so much scope to make young people be ready to transition into policy roles, to take up on ground work, interventions on ground, as well as in building awareness. But what we need to do is back them with knowledge, with platforms and mentorship. So a lot of it is what we're doing at UNCCD at the moment. And that is the idea behind forming the UNCCD Youth Caucus. So if you can move on to the next slide. So I would like to end with talking a bit about what we are doing at the Youth Caucus and how this is supporting regenerative agriculture and soil in general. So there are 4 ways we are trying to affect impact through youth. One is, of course, building capacity for youth, for them to build knowledge, skills which are required for engagement um, in land restoration, and of which regenerative agriculture is a big part, to empower youth to lead and advocate. So it's important to provide youth the right platform, right resources, right exposure to understanding how policy making works, how they can participate, and how they can learn from those who are already doing it. And as I mentioned, there are so many youth already working towards regenerative agriculture and making it mainstream, be it on ground, having their own farms or startups, or doing some kind of policy work. So we really working towards making these youth perspectives heard and also integrated into global policy discussions. And also we find that youth participation is lacking, not for because there aren't enough people, but because there's not enough avenue. So creating that space and avenue for young people from different backgrounds to contribute towards these processes and decision making bodies at a global level is the other bit we do. So this is largely what I have been working on at Save Soil in terms of policy and communication and how that impacts regenerative agriculture at large. So yeah, open to any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Mahathi. That was very insightful of you connecting policy and grassroots initiatives. Please, I remind you guys, please drop questions in the Q&A box. We'll take them at the end of the session when the speakers have spoken.
Colleagues, my colleague is experiencing some power cuts in South Africa. So I will step up and just ask Audrey. I think she was about to announce that if you have any questions please post them in the Q&A and we will answer them during the session. At this time, I would like to invite Audrey Darko to speak, but Keely, please take over and introduce Audrey. It's nice to see that you're back. Keely, take over and introduce Audrey.
Sorry about that. I'm just kindly struggling with network on my end. I was saying, thank you, Mahathi, for linking us to Policy and Grassroots Initiative. Please help me welcome Professor Ratan Lal, our globally renowned award-winning soil health scientist. Professor Lal today will speak on sustainable soil management practices, strategies to combat land degradation under changing climate, and also link us to how soil health links to global food security. Professor Lal, over to you. Professor, you're on mute at the moment.
Oh, I'm okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank you.
Am I okay? Audible? Thank you. I do not have any slides to present, but I did want to mention that soil health is very critical to many ecosystem services, as we just heard a few moments ago. Ecosystem services such as food security, water security, biodiversity, but more important, climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. In recent times, we have been thinking more and more how agricultural ecosystems and its soils can be a sink of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And that is directly related, of course, to soil health. The approximate estimate is that if soil health is improved globally, the technical potential of carbon sequestration in soils of the world is about 2.5 gigaton of carbon per year. That is 25% of the fossil fuel emissions. So it's a very major potential sink. And to realize that sink capacity, we must have policies which are pro-nature, pro-agriculture, and pro-farmer. And in that regard, I would like to mention that carbon grown in soil is a commodity. Just like farmers grow wheat or corn or soybean, dairy produce or beef or any other product to sell in the market and get income, similarly carbon grown in soil of agricultural land and ecosystem can create another income stream for farmers. And therefore it directly related to sustainable development goal and poverty, zero hunger, climate action, and justice for all inhabitants of the planet. So to do that, carbon's becoming a commodity, that means there must be some price tag on carbon. And the price is the social value of carbon. What is the value of ecosystem services that carbon in soil would create, such as climate change mitigation, such as water quality, renewability, such as quality and quantity of the food produced, such as biodiversity improvement, such as aesthetic value of the landscape, and so forth. Taking into consideration all these factors, some estimate indicate that the price of carbon grown on land that farmers can get income from is $50 per credit in 2025. About 10 years ago, it was about $35, but it's going up with time. So this $50 per credit, that means 1 metric ton of CO2 equivalent, where should that money come from? So we have about 700 million farmers of the world, of which almost 550 million farmers are small landholders of the tropics and subtropics. 150 million farmers are medium and large-scale farmers, such as in the Americas and Western Europe, Australia, etc. So if all those farmers are paid $50 equivalent per credit, that has a price tag about $100 billion per year. So the question that UNCCD and other organizations involved in land degradation neutrality and other issues of climate change mitigation and how to transform from agriculture being a problem to be a part of the solution will require an investment from humanity about $100 billion paid to the farmers per year. The question is, where should that come from? I think it should come from each one of the inhabitants, 8.2 billion people. So if you were to divide equally amongst everybody, that's about $12 per person per year. So for poor countries, that could be a large amount. But taking into consideration the cost of no action, that's a very small price indeed. So where should it come from? And I can only give suggestion. It's no mandate, no particular obligation by anybody. But I think oil exporting countries, certainly for the last 50, 60 years, all those countries have been played a major role in fossil fuel combustion. So I think there is a responsibility on their part. So perhaps 50, 60% of that total amount that farmers, land manager could be paid may, and I want to emphasize the word may, come from oil exporting countries. And they should be requested, called upon, think about the possibility how to reverse the trend that we have. Then agro-industries, whether it's fertilizer companies, pesticide company, machinery company, irrigation equipment company, grain processing company, all agricultural industries really should have 25, 30% responsibility to contribute toward that. Then the remaining 10 to 15%, you and me, all of us, each one of us is a culprit and a victim. Therefore, we each have a responsibility to contribute. So that's just one model of the financial model where it might happen. There might be other models which are more important. But the key component is to transform agriculture from being a problem to be a part of a solution. And that has a price tag. And the price tag is to pay the farmers for the ecosystem services that we are demanding from them to mitigate and adapt to climate change. In this regard, policymakers around the world obviously have an important role. The policies that I mentioned, pro-nature, pro-agriculture, and pro-farmer. But one key policy that I like to mention, I think the previous speaker used the term soil is a living entity. I borrowed that term from her. If soil has a living entity, then it must have a right to be protected, restored, and managed and thrive properly, like any other living entity has right. And that means we must have a Soil Health Act. Soil Health Act, that means even if you own the property, does not mean you can do with it what you wish, because soil is a living entity. And therefore, the idea is not to punish anyone. The idea is to reward those farmers and land managers and entrepreneurs who protect, restore, and sustainably manage the soil through payment for ecosystem services. And I think that's what the Soil Health Act should be. I hope that there's a Soil Health Act at every country, at every state, at every province, at every district, and every town, and eventually every farm level, to respect the most basic resource that the humanity has, on which all our ecosystem services depend. And for this act to happen, we must have education at all levels. I would like to begin at the primary level, primary school level, kindergarten, the alphabet books, alphabet books of all languages of the world, having soil, environment, climate as the basis of teaching the alphabet. I do not know many countries where such alphabet books exist, which are specifically oriented toward teaching young children the basic concepts of protecting, restoring, managing soil and the environment. And I think that is one of the recommendation. UNCCD, other UN organization should really make it apply to ensure that all major languages of the world consider having alphabet books which are environmental, soil, and climate oriented, so that from the very beginning children understand that what this basic resource is. And finally, one other thing that I like to mention in terms of this education, every school, beginning from the primary school, should have a garden, a vegetable garden, where the children know how to transplant tomatoes or how to grow corn or how a healthy soil look like, how soil biotic activity like earthworms look like. They should be familiar with the soil, the most basic resource from this garden that the school must have. I think that's what I wanted to say, and I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. I very much like the word regenerative agriculture, the concept, the idea. It's a philosophy, it's an approach, it's an ideology. It's not a practice. It's a concept. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Professor Lal, for laying such a strong foundation in our discussion today, as well as touching on the importance of educating the young about soil health. Thank you so much. Next up, we welcome Audrey. Audrey is an entrepreneur and an innovator working with cutting-edge regenerative agriculture and carbon finance. Audrey, welcome to the Generation Restoration Dialogues today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you, to have me, and to really have to hear a lot from Prof. Ratan Lal and also my distinguished panelists. Thank you so much to the audience as well. I also don't have slides. I really just wanted to talk from the heart. As an entrepreneur, I'm also a farmer, and I've been a farmer for the past 4 years, going on 5. And regenerative agriculture has been an approach that I have adopted personally, and that has also been an innovative approach that has spread across communities, especially in Ghana, where I'm based at the moment, and across sub-Saharan region. And how I think about regenerative agriculture, not only in my entrepreneurial world, but also as a farmer, is working with nature to ensure that you can grow food sustainably and not working against it. And thereby it looking at how you can maximize the already natural processes that are taking place within the soil, and also doing your best to minimize or even limit to the barest minimum harmful practices, that would do the soil ecosystem really bad. There are five principles that naturally are being taught under regenerative agriculture. And really with the soils, I've noticed and is aware that there's a relationship, right, that is being nurtured below the ground or beneath our feet. And that relationship and interaction that is going on is almost like what is happening above the ground with humans, where we're talking with each other, we're trying to feed ourselves and thrive. And that's the same phenomenon that's happening below the ground. So it's important that as a young farmer, as youth that are into the agriculture space, are looking at ensuring that we can create thriving landscapes and ecosystems, we're looking at the elements that are being put into the ground. So most of the practices that we have deployed, the first one has been with bring more diversity onto the landscape. and move away from a lot of monoculture work. So you can think of how do I put in more nitrogen fixing legumes? How do I couple that with my vegetable, my tomato? I was very excited when Prof mentioned the fact that schools should have vegetable gardens. And I think that's the first place to actually instill that mindset where you can grow amazing and diverse crops in one spot. And that would enriching the soil and as well enriching the nutrient density of the food. Another aspect we have focused on has been with the soil amendments. As a farmer, I think one of the policies I would also be looking at instilling in the countries across is how do we empower the farmer to actually produce their own natural climate-friendly organic soil amendment that they know are not synthetic, artificial, or harsh, but improve the soil biodiversity. And for us, one innovation has been with producing what we call biochar, right? And biochar basically, if it's new to you, it looks like charcoal. It's a charcoal-like material, but it's really rich in carbon. And as we know it, carbon is good for the soil. So what we do is turn the abundant, ubiquitous, openly dumped or burned waste, such as your rice husk, your sugarcane bagasse, your cocoa pod husks, into biochar. And biochar is a black carbon-rich material which is charred in the absence of oxygen, at least limited to no oxygen. And this produces a more stable form of carbon that goes back into the ground and does quite a number of things, such as improving the water holding capacity. So if you're in a drought-stricken area in my country, in the northern part, there are issues with drought, right? That helps improve the water holding capacity, and that also helps to improve the bioavailability of nutrients. But this is one way we've been doing it. And for the past 5 years, we've been identifying and selecting degraded landscapes, both in the mining areas or mine affected communities and in the poor agricultural landscape communities that have high acidity, that have low water retention, and deploying a waste to biochar organic soil amendment in there. And we feel that as part of the regenerative agricultural practices, farmers being empowered to be able to turn their waste into what people say black gold or wealth would be a sure way to actually accelerate the transition and also the availability of more organic and climate-friendly inputs that are really needed to actually grow more food sustainably. I think the last aspect I was going to touch on was going to be the fact that with regenerative agriculture, it's important that we are looking at the various elements at play. So you're looking at animals, you're not just looking at plants. How are we integrating that interaction and relationship, have more of the animals across the field, dropping their manure, their litter, and this goes back into the soil, and ensuring that we can create a more closed loop fashion and turn what people will turn as waste back into the land. I'm very excited about the space as a young farmer, and I'm hoping that with the various practices that are at play, we can look at how we can work and mimic nature to ensure that we can grow food sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. It's truly inspiring to see young people taking an initiative in land restoration, as well as ensuring that we do maintain the resources that we are currently have in order for the future to also have access to them. Now we move to our audience segment where we take in your questions and ask our speakers. So please do not forget, if you still have questions, please leave them in the Q&A box where we can take them. So the first question is to Mahathi. From experience supporting land restoration efforts, what are the most promising policy or program approaches for scaling regenerative agriculture?
Hi, thanks for the question. Yes, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So if I got the, sorry, your voice is breaking a bit, Kiri. So if I got the question right, what are the most impactful policies to promote regenerative agriculture? Is that it?
Yes, Mahathi, from your
Yeah.
experience.
Okay. Um, so I
Can I repeat the
mentioned a few
question? Can you hear
policies that
me?
different countries. I can hear you. I think I got it. Thank you. Yes. So, having been in the space, there are many policies that are very well intentioned. And when we think of effective policies, a big part of them being effective is how are they implemented on ground. So from what I have seen, there are many policies across countries which incentivize soil health, that promote practices that promote regenerative agriculture in many ways. But a lot of them, they sort of are not as effective as they are intentioned to be, because they're not implemented in the right way. There's just so many factors that go into ensuring how effective a policy is. So, in my experience, the drafting of policies is something that more or less is done taking into consideration data, taking into consideration different stakeholders. But I would just like to maybe take one example, like the soil health card in India. It's a scheme, a policy scheme, and which provides free soil testing for farmers across the country. So till date, over several millions of farmers have been able to test their soil free of cost. They essentially send a sample of the soil to the nearest testing center, and they get back the result. And that's something that's been vastly useful for farmers on ground, because they can't really afford to do that otherwise. So, and it also provides them recommendations with what is missing from the soil, or what kind of fertilizers to use, because a lot of times farmers don't know what is missing from their soil. They tend to just add all kinds of fertilizers, nitrogen based, phosphorus based, irrespective of whether the soil needs it or not, and it increases their input cost a lot. So this scheme is essentially helping them to figure out which specific input to add and which not to add, which might make their soil even worse. So that's, I think, one effective scheme that I would like to highlight. But again, there are just so many which even this comes with its own implementation challenges. In the sense, a lot of farmers are illiterate and they don't know what to do with the soil cards. There are issues that come with it as well, but largely it's been successful. So that's one policy I'd like to highlight.
Amazing. And the second question says, a lot of terms are evolving that create confusion, such as organic farming, regenerative agriculture, climate smart agriculture, agroecology. What is the boundary? This is a question to all our panelists. So if you do have an answer, you can just chip in.
Maybe I can begin answering that very important question. Very nice indeed. To answer that, I'd like to mention that the Green Revolution of the 1960s, which made many countries in South Asia, Central America, and elsewhere food self-sufficient, was seed-centric. It was based on improved varieties, and the varieties which are short-statured, and their grain production was more than the straw production. And it really was something that was absolutely miracle to have productivity increase dramatically. But that approach has now, over the last 6-7 decades or so, adverse impact on environment, which is not any defect of the system per se, but we ignored soil, natural resources, especially soil health. So we are hoping that the green revolution based on varieties was a great idea, but now is the time to make sure that we understand that the benefit of improved varieties can only be realized if they are grown in a healthy soil. So we are looking for a revolution which is also, in addition to seed-centric, is soil-centric. And from that point of view, payment to the farmer for managing and restoring soil as a carbon as one of the commodity could be a very important policy initiative. I think the mention in question was organic farming, regenerative agriculture, agroecology. These are all important initiatives. One I like to add to that list is conservation agriculture, which in developing countries such as South Asia and Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, conservation agriculture, which is very important component of improved agroecosystem, is not being widely practiced. Even in South Asia, it's not being widely practiced. And the reason is because the crop residue, which must be returned to the land for recycling nutrients and protecting against soil erosion, has many other uses for small, poor landholder farmers. And therefore, rewarding farmers for adopting good practices is critically important part of the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And then we have a second question. This is, what are some of the most effective low-cost soil restoration techniques that youth or smallholder farmers can adopt, especially in resource-limited settings?
Okay, I'd like to take that. There are quite a couple. And the first one is, first of all, just making sure that you are looking into cover crops, right? How are you making sure your crops are covered and not bare or super exposed? Whether that is, keeping specific maybe leguminous crops or looking at specific good weeds that could just be very not too high in growth, but quite low. That would be great. Another that I know of has to do with the diversity, crop rotation. How are you having the various types of crops, whether it's with cereal, making it up with leguminous crops down to vegetables, to just ensure that the nutrients within the soil are kind of diverse. Other low cost I would, since I'm quite biased as well to waste to biochar, is how can you turn your excess abundant waste into char, which basically just means taking quantity of waste and then heating it up with just pure fire and covering it up and letting it turn into black charcoal-like material. And that going back into the soil helps to also improve the biodiversity, water retention, and whatnot. And as well, also just minimizing as well the disturbance of the soil. So under conservation agriculture, a lot of people talk about no-till as an approach to ensure that you are not disrupting the interactions and relationships that are being built below your feet. These are a few that come to mind at the moment.
Thank you, Aubrey. And then the second question, this one is for you specifically, says, as a young person and passionate about land restoration, what are some actionable first steps I can take in my community?
All right. I think the first step is to start and identify other people, other youth, other children in the community that echo your passion and your sentiment. I think another aspect is with identifying a school, right? I strongly believe in what Prof talked about around setting up, whether it's really small scale gardens in schools and maybe being the pioneer or champion that speaks to the headmaster or headmistress about having a mini garden there and teaching them the various practices that will enable them grow food, understand what's happening with the soil ecosystem, and how they can work with nature to grow food for themselves. I think the other aspect is you could also get to know more by joining the UNCCD Youth Caucus. I'm under as well under the Sustainable Land Management and Restoration thematic group, and over there there are like-minded youth that are thinking of ways to restore land, and also have as well different innovations and ideas. Joining such community would not just inspire you, but would get you to move to the ground and just start. Yeah, that's what comes to mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. And then our last question for today is to Prof. It says, what role do you see for international collaboration in promoting widespread adoption of regenerative agriculture?
Would you like me to say something about it?
Yes, Prof. The question is.
I think regional cooperation is very, very critical. Absolutely critical, because the problem we are facing of climate change and food insecurity, nutritional insecurity is so humongous, so large, that cooperation is absolutely essential. I'd like to mention 2 areas of cooperation, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. One is irrigation, supplemental irrigation. As the climate change happens, supplemental irrigation, small-scale irrigation, solar power-based pumping equipment, etc. Africa at the moment, sub-Saharan Africa, hardly 6 to 7% of cropland area is equipped for irrigation. So that is where cooperation we need tremendously to improve areas which have a small-scale irrigation project to alleviate drought, which is going to happen more and more. The second part, again, I'd like to mention in case of sub-Saharan Africa, we have a nutrient mining problem. Nutrient mining problem means plants or crops and animals are removing nutrients from the land, but these nutrients are not being returned. Consequently, we have a nutrient deficit, negative nutrient budget of about 40 to 50 kilogram of NPK per hectare per year. This cannot continue. Here we need a strong cooperation among nations, among organizations, between public and private sector to support the idea of eliminate nutrient mining and also improve irrigation facilities, especially small landholder. And these are important components of regenerative agriculture that we should consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. That was very insightful. I see we have a hand risen. Can you kindly drop your question in the Q&A box, please? And in closing, I would like to thank all our speakers for joining us today. Very insightful, very mindful, actually. You know, your insights are very appreciated. Thank you guys for joining us. And we are back again next month on the 7th of August for climate change resilience and land management. So please do register for next month's dialogue as well. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Mahathi. Thank you, Audrey. Truly a pleasure to have you guys on our platform. Have a lovely,
Thank you so much,
lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.